guys, welcome back to our channel. Just a heads up, this whole video I'm probably going to be looking at the screen instead of the camera, so just go with it. But today I'm going to be telling you guys my pregnancy, labor, and postpartum experience with Benjamin, and he's actually right here. So today I'm going to be sharing that experience with you. But before we get started, we didn't really introduce ourselves in our first video, so I'm going to take the time right now to just let you know a little bit about us. This is my husband Blaine. He's in the military, he's a Marine, and we live out in Arizona. I'm originally from California and he's originally from Indiana. We met in 2018, got married in 2019, found out we were pregnant with this little guy in May of 2019, and we had him January 3rd of 2020. Yeah. Oh, and if I didn't say before, my name's Ashley, my husband's name is Blaine, and our son's name is Benjamin. And we also have a dog named Malibu. You just find everything funny right now, huh? So that's our little family. So we'll go ahead and get on with the rest of the video. My darling, I love you, 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 I love you. So I got pregnant and we found out May 3rd of last year. The reason that I took a test was because I had been feeling really bloated and I was having headaches and kind of feeling tired, and my husband actually kind of joked, hey, maybe you're pregnant, we should take a test. And I was like, oh, you know, it's just gonna come out negative. But we got the test anyway. Came home, and while he was in the shower I took the test, and I wasn't really expecting it to be positive. I took the test, left it in the bathroom, and went and sat on the bed, got on my phone, totally forgot about the test. And then after a couple minutes I was like, oh yeah, let's go check the test. And I picked it up. There were 2 solid lines. And when I first picked it up, I looked at it and then set it back down because I was like, okay, I'm not pregnant. And then it hit me that there were 2 lines, and I was like, wait a minute. So picked it back up, looked at it again, and I was pregnant. I always wanted to do some really cute way of telling my husband that I was pregnant. Like whenever we found out that we were pregnant, I wanted to do something really cute. But in that moment, I was so excited. I went into his restroom where he was taking a shower and pulled back the curtain, and he was about to get out anyway. He put his towel over his face to dry himself off, and when he took the towel down, I was holding the pregnancy test out in front of him. So that was kind of a little shock for him. But I was crying, he started crying, we were super happy, and we just couldn't believe it. And then I ended up taking the second test just to make sure, because we were really excited and we didn't want to get excited for nothing. So I took another test that night and it was positive. We went and got another box and took 2 more pregnancy tests the next day, and it was positive. So then I scheduled an appointment with a doctor here on base and did a test there, and they called me later that day, told me I was pregnant. When they called and confirmed that I was pregnant, that's when we really let ourselves be excited, because it was for sure, it was real, you know. So fast forward, the whole first half of my pregnancy I was really sick. Morning sickness was not just in the morning. So if people tell you that it's just in the morning, don't believe them. Some people have it in the morning, some people have it at night, some people have it all day. I had it all day, so it wasn't fun. I had to be on some nausea medication for it, and I ended up getting dissolvable pills because that was the only thing I could take. If I tried to take actual pills, I would just throw them back up. So I had to get dissolvable ones, and those actually really helped me. But I was very queasy and nauseous, throwing up all the time my first half of my pregnancy. And I was in and out of the hospital quite a bit. It was pretty bad. And then I was in the hospital a few times for infections, which was really scary, but every single time I just got antibiotics and everything was perfectly fine. The second half of my pregnancy, I still had a little bit of sickness, but it wasn't too bad. Every now and then it would come and go. The last half of my pregnancy was really when I was finally able to eat different things. I didn't get sick from certain things, and I was finally able to eat, so that was nice. But the last part of my pregnancy, I had really, really bad heartburn, and so that actually limited what I could eat again, because certain things would cause the heartburn to be worse. So I had Tums on me at all times, and I had to take them pretty much every night, and it was really, really annoying. I even threw up a couple times because of the heartburn, and that was not fun. It burned so bad. So that was not a fun experience. So my pregnancy itself was not too much of a fun time. I know some people, pregnancy is just a super magical time for them. Don't get me wrong, I loved being pregnant, I loved carrying Benjamin, but the experience itself was not very great. It put me through a lot, so it was a lot to handle. So by the end, I was really ready to give birth and just have him here already. Me and my husband were both super excited and impatient and just ready for him to be here. On New Year's Eve, actually, well, let's go back. My due date was January 7th, and on New Year's Eve, we went back to my hometown to spend time with my family, and that night, for some reason, I don't know why, I decided to take my blood pressure. My mom has a little monitor at home to check her blood pressure because she's got heart problems and low blood pressure, so she checks it quite a bit. So, but for some reason that night, I decided to check mine, and it was really high, and so that kind of threw me off a little bit. I waited 30 minutes, took it again, it was still really high. I took it probably 8 times, and it was high every single time. So we ended up going to the hospital because I know that high blood pressure can be a sign of preeclampsia. So it was really scary for me, and I wanted to make sure that Benji was okay, that I was okay. So we went to the hospital in my hometown. That's where we got to ring in the new year. We spent New Year's in the hospital. The whole time that we were in the hospital, they didn't really tell us very much. I never saw a doctor. It was a nurse dealing with me the whole time. A doctor never came into the room. They monitored me. I was having contractions, but she said that was fine. They checked different things. They tested my urine, because if you have protein in your urine, that's also a sign of preeclampsia, and I did have protein in my urine. But they ended up discharging me and saying that I probably just had an infection and to follow up with my doctor. That's all they told me. They released me, they didn't give me anything, they just said follow up with your doctor, you're fine. So Luckily, I already had a doctor's appointment scheduled for 2 days later. So 2 days later, I go to my doctor and I told him about the whole thing. I told him that I had been recording my blood pressure at home. It was super high. We went to the hospital. I had protein in my urine and they didn't do anything. So he took my blood pressure, they tested my urine, and my blood pressure was still high. I still had protein in my urine, and my doctor was very mad. He was very mad because he said the hospital should have never let me go. He said I had preeclampsia, and that was very dangerous for me and the baby, and he was very, very upset that the hospital let me go because I showed signs and they did nothing. So he ended up sending us straight to the hospital here where we live. He sent us straight to the hospital and told me to check in with the laborist and that I was getting induced. And the funny thing is, going into that appointment, we kind of joked, oh, what if I get induced today? Oh, what if you get induced? And then when he left the room, we were like, did he just say induced? And I was trying not to get too excited because, of course, we wanted Benji to be here, but I was like, okay, they're probably going to have me go into triage, check me out, make sure it's preeclampsia, and then, if it is, then they'll get me in, get me induced, yada, yada, yada. So we go to the hospital, we go to labor and delivery, they get me into triage, they run tests, they have me hooked up to a blood pressure monitor. After a while, they came in, the laborist came in, and he said, yeah, so you have preeclampsia, we're gonna get you induced today. He said, you're also anemic, so we're gonna have to get you on iron for that. So I was hooked up to a couple different things. I was hooked up to magnesium, I was hooked up to iron, I had to take my pills to start the induction, and being on the magnesium, I wasn't allowed to get up and get out of bed. I had to stay in bed. I wasn't allowed to walk around. From the moment I got induced to a day after giving birth, I wasn't allowed out of bed. And then after they gave me the pills, I was at 0 centimeters dilated. For those of you that don't know, to give birth, to actually push, you have to be 10 centimeters. And I was 0, so I wasn't progressing. They gave me the pills at 5:30. By 7:30, they came in to put the catheter because I couldn't get out of bed. So they came in to put a catheter, and as the nurse was about to do that, my water broke. After that, my contractions started getting more intense. So by midnight, I ended up getting the epidural, and at that point I was only 1 centimeter. So it made me feel really down because I know there's a lot of women that go all the way up to 5 or 6 before getting an epidural, and I only made it to 1, but the nurse was telling me that since my water had already broke that early on, it was making the contractions worse, even though I wasn't at a very high centimeter. The fact that my water had already broke was making it worse, so she kind of told me not to feel bad about it. So I got the epidural at around midnight. By 4 o'clock, I was 4 centimeters, and then they told me to call my mom, tell her to come out, so I did, and I didn't end up going into labor until 5:30 in the afternoon the next day. That was rough. That was really rough. It's nothing like I was expecting. I don't know if I'm just dumb or naive or whatever. But I thought that the epidural helped with the pain when you give birth, and the epidural only helps with your contraction pain. You still feel everything down there when you're giving birth, when you're pushing, when baby's coming out. You still feel everything down there, and it's very painful, very painful. And I had to be hooked up to oxygen because I was freaking out. So I ended up pushing for about an hour, pretty much an hour, yeah. I started pushing at 5:30 and he was born at 6:38. But it was a really rough experience. He got stuck for a while, so I had to push extra hard, which was really hard for me. I also have asthma, so it's hard for me to hold my breath for a very long time, and when you have to push, you have to hold your breath and push, and they would want me to hold for a really long time, and I can't do that. So it took a while to get him out, but he finally made his way into the world, and while they took him to go get weighed and cleaned up and all, well, back up. First they put him on my chest, and so I got to hold him for maybe like 2 minutes, and then they took him to go clean him up and weigh him and measure him and everything. While they were doing that, the midwife was still trying to deliver my placenta, and that was another challenge. They had a hard time trying to get my placenta to come out. It was still like stuck inside, attached to the wall. So I was pushing, one of the midwives was pushing down on my stomach to try to like help push, and it just wasn't doing anything. So the midwife ended up having to reach in and pull it out. That was the only way that it was going to come out. So after that, they brought him over to me to do skin to skin, and he weighed 8 pounds 4 ounces, which we didn't know what he was going to weigh. At our appointments, they never gave us an estimate of what he was going to weigh. We were thinking that he wasn't going to weigh that much. Our bets were 6 or 7 pounds because I wasn't that big. We were both 6-pound babies. So we thought he was going to be small, but he was 8 pounds 4 ounces, and he was 22 inches long. After that, oh, also something I left out, being on the magnesium, I wasn't allowed to eat anything until after giving birth. So once they hooked me up to the magnesium, at 5:30 the day before, I couldn't eat until after I gave birth the next day. So after I gave birth, they brought food in, but I wasn't really feeling too good, so I didn't really eat much of it. Me and my husband kind of shared it. The nurse I had after giving birth was really amazing. She took care of me really good, and since I wasn't allowed to get out of bed, Blaine had to do everything with Benjamin, and the nurse was really nice in showing him how to do everything. She helped him change his diaper, she showed him how to give him his bath, and she was just really nice, and she took care of me really well too. Shout out to Desiree. I wasn't allowed to get out of bed for another 24 hours after having Benjamin because they had to keep me on the magnesium to make sure that I was going to be okay because of the preeclampsia and my high blood pressure. So they would come in to take my blood pressure about every 3 hours, I think. I was stuck in bed, and I had these little things on my feet, these little blow-up things on the bottom, and they would just air up and deflate and air up and deflate just to keep the circulation in my legs going because I wasn't able to get up and walk around. I had so many IVs, oh my goodness. I had iron, I had magnesium, I had fluids, They were coming in quite often to do blood tests, so they were doing labs constantly, so I was constantly getting poked. The next day I had to have a blood transfusion because of my levels being so low and being in the anemic category. I got 3 bags of blood. And then, oh, it was just so much. After the 24 hours was up, I was able to get up and walk around, and they make you go to the bathroom within the first 6 hours of getting up, and if you don't go, then you get put back on the catheter. So your goal is to go to the bathroom, and I did. The very first time that they took me to the restroom, I went to the restroom. So that wasn't a problem. My back was in a lot of pain. So getting up was kind of hard, but the more I got up, the more it felt better. And I was happy to finally be able to get up and check on Benji and just do things on my own. So that was nice. They ended up keeping me, I had my induction on a Thursday, I gave birth on a Friday, and they ended up keeping me in the hospital until Monday. I was supposed to get released on Sunday, but the doctor decided to keep me an extra day because my blood pressure was still kind of high. So they kept me an extra day just to monitor things. And finally, my blood pressure went down. They gave me some more iron before I left, and we went home on Monday. So we came home, we brought Benji home, we were really happy to be home instead of in the hospital. I was really happy to not be hooked up to any machines anymore. So it was just really nice. Spent the night at home. The next day, on Tuesday, I was here at the house with Benji. Blaine went to go get his hair cut, and while he was doing that, I was sitting in the living room on the couch, and out of nowhere, I got chills. I got really cold. I got really shaky, uncontrollably shaky. I couldn't stop myself from shaking. I had goosebumps. My skin was cold to the touch. It was just really bad, and I didn't know what was going on. Benji was asleep at the time, but I knew it was going to be his feeding time pretty soon, and so I called Blaine because I was pretty scared about what was happening with me, and because of how shaky I was, I didn't want to try and pick Benji up to feed him and end up dropping him because of how shaky I was. So I told Blaine to come home. I was crying at this point because it was really scary. I was freaking out. It was just really scary because I couldn't control it. I couldn't control my own body, so that really scares me. I've had panic attacks before, and the one thing I hate is not being able to control myself, to control my own body, not having that ability to control your own mind and body. That really bugs me. So when that happened, I was freaking out because I couldn't stop it. I had blankets on me and I was still freezing. He came home. I ended up picking up Benji and I was holding him to keep me warm because I was so cold. And Blaine ended up taking my temperature, and it was about, I want to say, I think it was 100.4. He ended up taking me upstairs. So I ended up coming and laying in bed. I covered up. I told him to go turn on the heat because I was so cold. So I laid up here for a while, and then he checked on me. At that point, I was really out of it. I couldn't talk very well. And then I was getting really, really hot, like sweaty, super hot. So he took my temperature again, and it was 101.4 or something like that, I think. And he decided to take me to the hospital. I didn't want to go to the hospital. I didn't want to go at all because we had just got home from the hospital. I didn't want to be poked or hooked up to anything again. I wanted to stay home and see how this would play out, if it would go away or anything like that. But my husband made me go to the hospital. He actually carried me out of the bedroom downstairs and took me to the car because I couldn't even stand on my own. I tried getting out of bed and immediately just slumped down. So he picked me up and carried me down the stairs to the front door, and then I walked with him to the car, but it was more like he was dragging me because I couldn't really walk. I was kind of just clinging on to him as he took me to the car. So we got in the car. Couldn't have been a worse day. There was so much traffic. I think there was some construction going on. It took us forever to get to the hospital. I think it took us about an hour to get to the hospital when normally it should only take about 15 minutes. So he was getting impatient. I was just out of it. I didn't care what was going on. But we got there and it was packed, and he didn't want to carry me into the emergency room, so he went inside and asked for a wheelchair. Because it was so busy, all the wheelchairs were taken up, so they had to wait for someone to bring a wheelchair. So we sat in the car, someone brought a wheelchair, took me inside, and he had Benji with him, and because it's flu season, they made him and Benji go sit in a different room separated from everybody. So I was in the waiting room by myself, and they called me in to just the little, I don't even know what it's called, kind of like a little triage thing, I guess, kind of where they get your information and ask you what's going on and then get you a room. So they took me in there. Blaine and Benji were still in that separate room, and the lady asking for my information was really rude. The nurse that wheeled me in was trying to help me out because I couldn't talk. I was so out of it. So she was trying to help me by asking me yes or no questions, and like by saying, you know, do you feel this? Do you feel this? And the lady taking the information she was just so rude. She was like, don't give her any ideas. And I was like, oh my gosh, she's just trying to help me out because I can't talk. So anyway, another nurse comes in and tells the lady taking the information, this patient just gave birth a couple days ago. She had preeclampsia. She had this. Like, she told her all my problems. And so then it kind of sunk in with that lady, like, okay, this is serious. And I was like, duh. Then Blaine came in. Someone finally like went and got him. So he came in and he was explaining to that lady too everything that had happened. She was not rude to Blaine, so that was nice. They get me in a room and they start monitoring everything. They get me hooked up to an IV. They take my blood pressure. They take lab work, blood. They did all kinds of different things to try to see what was going on. They asked us what went on at home. And then, while we were in the room talking about this, I started to go into it again, where I got really cold and shaky, but this time it was a lot worse than it was at home. I mean, I was so clenched tight and shaking. It hurt because I was so clenched up from shaking. And they had the nurse in there, they had another nurse doing an EKG, they had the doctor, they had another nurse, they had everybody doing stuff. I was breathing really fast, really hard. They had an EKG on me, they were putting the blood pressure cuff on me. My blood pressure was, I think, 200 over 100 something. It was super high, like not even what it should be, dangerously high. My heart rate was in the 200s. Everyone was kind of standing still in there, kind of like they didn't know what to do. The doctor told the EKG tech to run it again, make sure everything was connected right. While he was checking the connections, I happened to look at my hands. My hands were purple. Like, they were purple. I felt so bad. I felt so bad for Blaine, because having to go through all that and see all of that going on, and he's got the baby with him, and he's having to see all this and he can't do anything. I know that it freaked him out a lot, and he told me, because I wasn't really paying attention to all that stuff too much. I was in the middle of doing all this, and he told me that everyone in there they looked shocked, they looked like they didn't know what was going to happen. They looked scared because of everything that was going on. My numbers were so high, so he said they looked scared, and that scared him. And eventually I came down from all of it, my breathing got back to normal, I was okay, my heart rate came back down, my blood pressure came down a bit, and then I started getting really hot, so they had to bring in wet towels to put on my face, they brought me ice to eat, and we were in there for a little while longer, and then they came in and said, you know, since you gave birth, we're gonna transfer you up to the women's section of the hospital, and your doctor is gonna be your doctor from labor and delivery, since he knows kind of what went on with that. So I got taken upstairs, and we didn't know what was going on. They told us maybe a piece of the placenta was still attached and that was causing an infection, but we didn't know for sure. They still had to do tests. We did not know how long we were going to be there. We were expecting, okay, maybe I'll be here tonight, maybe 2 nights, whatever. We were there for a week, and that whole week they never really told us what was going on. They were doing tests, they did blood work every 3 hours almost, it seemed like. I don't know. They did blood work like a lot. I had an IV. It was a lot. They were doing ultrasounds to see if there was anything still inside. They did a blood culture. They did all kinds of things. And every day they kind of came in and said, you know, hopefully tomorrow's the day you get to go home. So we would get excited, and then the next day they'd say, no, you're not going home today. Hopefully tomorrow. So it was just constantly the same thing. And every time we would ask them what was going on, they would kind of say, you know, I don't know, maybe this, or they would just say, you know, they couldn't tell us. And so we didn't know how serious it was, we didn't know what was going on, and it was really frustrating too, because Benjamin wasn't allowed to be there because it was flu season. So I had to call my mom, and my mom stayed here at our house with him. and Blaine would stay with me, and then he would go home, be with Benjamin for a while, and then go get other things done. He had to take him to his first doctor's appointment by himself, which, oh, that really hurt me because I wasn't able to be there. So I started getting really down about things because when I gave birth to him, I couldn't change his first diaper. I couldn't take care of him because I was hooked up to that magnesium and I wasn't allowed to get out of bed. Now, again, I'm in the hospital. He was allowed to be there the first day that we were there because we didn't have any other option. But I wasn't allowed to touch him. I wasn't allowed to have him with me, so I wasn't allowed to do anything with him. And then he had to go home and be with my mom here. So I missed out on his first week, and so it was really getting me down that I was missing all this stuff, and that Blaine was taking him to his first doctor's appointment and to all this stuff. I felt like he's not gonna know who I am. He's not gonna bond with me because he's already gonna be so bonded to Blaine and to my mom, and he's not gonna know who I am. So it was really getting to me. I cried about that almost every day I was in the hospital. I FaceTimed a lot to see him because I couldn't be without him. But eventually, after all these days of not knowing what was going on, a doctor came in and she finally told me what was wrong with me. And when she told me, I wanted to cry. And when she left the room, I did cry because the whole time we were there, I wasn't thinking it was something super serious. I just thought they weren't figuring it out. But it was something really serious, and it hit me, and it was really scary. She told me that I had sepsis, and for those of you that don't know what sepsis is when you get an infection in your bloodstream, when you have bacteria in your blood. So, it's not just some infection in your body or whatever, it's in your blood, so it's very, very dangerous. The mortality rate of sepsis is 50%. And that's really big, and so it scared me a lot because then it just really hit me, if I would have stayed home, if we wouldn't have caught it, I could have died at home. I could have not been here to take care of my son that I just gave birth to, There's just so much that I could have missed out on, and I'm just really thankful that my husband carried me to safety, pretty much. If my husband wouldn't have taken me to the hospital, if I would have stayed home like I wanted to, there's a good chance that I wouldn't be sitting here right now. But I am. And it just hit me so hard. Everything that I could have lost if I didn't go. And finding out that that's what I had, it was scary because we didn't know anything the whole time we were there. And then finally, the day before I was released, they tell us what it was, and it's something super serious. But they still didn't really tell us how I got it, how I ended up with that. So I didn't know what caused it, I just knew I had it. So when I got released, I got 2 antibiotics that I had to take for 10 days. The whole time I was in the hospital, I was hooked up to antibiotics. So I had to take antibiotics after I got out of the hospital. Then I went in at about, I think, 4 or 5 weeks postpartum and had my postpartum check. And I told the doctor about everything that happened, giving birth, everything that happened the week after, being in the hospital that whole week with sepsis. And he couldn't really believe it. He was like, wow, you had a rough go. But he asked me, he said, did you have a rough time delivering the placenta? And I said, yeah. And he said, did they have to actually reach in and pull it out? And I said, yeah. And he said, there you go. And I was like, what? Like, there you go, what? But he said, that's how you got the infection. That's how you got sepsis. He said, normally people deliver it fine. There's no reason that people have to actually reach in. In rare cases that it doesn't come out, the doctor or midwife have to actually reach in and get it. And he said, you're that one rare case that it happened to. And he was like, and that's how you got the infection, because usually that's not something that's normal. People don't usually have to do that. So that happening, her having to put her hand in there, that's how you got the transfer, and that's how you got the bacteria. And so I was like, well, that's nice. But he said, you know, it's a good thing that you went to the hospital, that your husband took you, and you're fine. And he said I looked perfectly healthy. Everything was good. So that was some good news for a change, because after being in the hospital so much, I was tired of it. I didn't want any bad news. I just wanted to be home. So hearing that was really nice. My story is not like other people's. I know there's a lot of people that have really great stories. Their pregnancy was really great. Their delivery was great. They love having kids. Mine is not that story. I'm not sure if we'll have kids again after this. He might be our only one, just because the pregnancy was rough, the delivery was rough, what happened afterwards was rough. It was just a lot. So I don't know. Everyone says later on down the road that I'll want more, I'll forget everything that happened, but it's kind of hard to forget all that, especially when there was something so potentially fatal. I don't know if I would really want to risk any of that again, but I am very glad that I went through it all. I'm glad that I have Benji out of that. I'm just glad I went through it. It was really rough, but it brought some perspective. It made, not that I didn't already appreciate my husband and having a son, but it just made me appreciate everything a lot more, and appreciate the time that I have with them. And now, that whole time I was worried that he wasn't gonna be bonded to me because I spent so much time away from him. Well, now he's more attached to me, so I'm the one that knows how to get him to stop crying and things like that, so it all came around. I thought that he wasn't going to be bonded to me, and now he's majorly bonded to me. It's just really nice. So that's my birth story. It's a bit of a rough one. Not everybody's birth experience is going to be like this, so I don't mean to scare anybody that's pregnant or trying to get pregnant, or just wants to be pregnant in the future. I'm not trying to scare you. Not everybody's experience is like this. There's a lot of people who have really good experiences. I just got the not so good one. But don't let that turn you off, because I ended up with the cutest little baby out of it, so it was definitely worth it. So yeah, so that's my birth story. I told you I was going to be looking at the screen instead of the camera the whole time, and I know I did, so I'm doing it right now. Anyway, thank you for watching. I know it was a longer video, and it might have been boring for some of you, but that was my story, and I just wanted to share it, and I wanted to share how it helped me realize what I have, and yeah. So thank you for watching. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button, like this video, comment, do whatever you can. Tune in for our next videos coming up. I don't know what they're gonna be yet, but tune in. Thanks for watching. Bye.
You are my one and only, and you can wrap your fingers round my thumb and hold me tight. Oh, you are my one and only, you can wrap your fingers round my thumb and hold me tight, and you'll be alright. And you can lie with me with your tiny feet. When you're half asleep, I leave you be right in front of me for a couple weeks, so I could keep you safe. 'Cause you are my one and only. You can wrap your fingers round my thumb and hold me tight. You are my one and only. You can wrap your fingers round my thumb and hold me tight. You'll be alright. You are my one and only, and you can wrap your fingers round